We know that despotic forms of government dismiss the significance and value of individual human lives. Today, we'll explore some implications of a government's dismissal of the right to life. Brian Johnston is the Western Director of the National Right to Life Committee. He has served in many capacities while advocating for innocent lives, as California Commissioner on Aging, as Chairman of the California Pro-Life Council, on the board of the National Legal Center for the Medically Dependent and Disabled. And now here's our host, Brian Johnston.
Welcome back to Life Matters. We're your program on the right to life, the culture that emanates from that statement. It's a statement of philosophy. It's a statement in our founding documents that says every human being is unique, endowed by their Creator with the right to be alive, and that the government did not endow you with that right. It also says specifically the government has a duty to protect your right to be alive. But there's a battle of ideas right now, and that battle is raging all around us, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the battle of ideas, the battle against common sense, and what you can do to assert the self-evident truths, the facts of the right to life. Last time, we talked about a very insidious and evil idea that's infected our entire culture. People next to you in the pew at church, your kids when they go to school, you and I when we were educated. We were subjected to some interesting ideas. Not all of them were valid, but a lot of them felt good at the time. One of them is the moral idea of progress. And in our last broadcast, we spoke, not directly, but we let him speak, with Peter Singer. Peter Singer is the father of the animal rights movement, but much more than that. Peter Singer is also an expert in Hegel and Hegelian thinking, and we gave him a chance to describe Hegel. And he was in a conversation with another philosopher, Brian McGee from London, and they were explaining what Hegel is and why it's attractive, why it's infectious, why so many people that you know are influenced by Hegel's philosophy, and they don't even know it. They don't even know the name Hegel. And yet they've embraced this view of morality changing and the need for morality to change. Perhaps the scariest thing about Hegel, and again, go back to our last program, you can go back on the podcast, and Peter Singer, in his own words, talks about how widespread this ideology is and how much it's influenced your society. That means your friends. That means you. And we have to recognize it so that we can separate it from clear thinking. That's why we want to understand in this battle of ideas what's at stake. The other thing about Peter Singer, he's the father of post-birth abortion as an ideology. And in 2019, on January 22nd, the state of New York signed that into law. Many other states are pushing post-birth abortion. How could these ideas be seen as valid? Killing a human baby, a squirming human baby on the table, and the law blessing it, and the government saying, go ahead, and in many cases, the government paying for it. How could that possibly be? You'll find out when you listen to that program on Hegel and why Hegel and Hegelian thinking has destroyed nations. It's the basis of communism. It's the basis of National Socialism, that's Nazism, and how it creates governments that destroy their own countries by destroying their own people. It's an evil and insidious idea. When we come back, we're going to talk about the answers. We're going to talk about how to deal with these convoluted thoughts that make no sense, that have no foundation in either law or logic. What can we do about it? We're going to hear from President Abraham Lincoln, because he had to fight in the battle of ideas. He had to fight for the laws, whether they would protect those who can't protect themselves. And he was dealing with a cultural battle that was deeply rooted. Even many people in the North did not want to end slavery because it had been with our nation for so long. That thinking had been accommodated. What was Lincoln's answer? Well, it's the answer that you have. It's the answer that we all have, and it's not as hard as you think. Join us in just a bit as we talk about what Abraham Lincoln did, and more importantly, how common sense and objective facts are our tools. You have to use them. The facts are on our side, and facts are terrible things to waste.
If you have questions or comments for Life Matters, call 800-924-2490 Give us your name and the town you're calling from and a quick question or comment. You're listening to Life Matters.
Well, hi. I just wanted to thank you for joining me. You know, I have good friends, children, young adults, and adults that have Down syndrome. And they are so loved. Their parents love them so much because they're the happiest people you'd ever want to know. I really love them. I'm going to tell you something, though, that's rather frightening. The government of France has now prohibited showing positive images of Down syndrome children and letting parents know how lovable they are. That's an actual law in France. Here in the U.S., 80-some-odd% of Down syndrome kids are killed by abortion before they're born. In France, it's 96%. So we're not a whole lot better. If you'd like to help out, you can go to the National Down Syndrome Society, ndss.org, to help out. That's ndss.org. We really are in a battle of ideas, and lives really are at stake.
And now back to more Life Matters with Brian Johnston.
Well, welcome back to Life Matters. We're talking about life, culture, and this very real battle of ideas that you're in. You're in this battle, and if you're not aware of it, you've lost. So we're trying to equip you to win. And one of the things we've been talking about is the idea of progressivism. Where did it come from? If you haven't understood it before, you need to understand its origins in a philosopher called Hegel. Go back and listen. But now we're going to talk about the answer to right now, because there's people proclaiming some rather dangerous ideas that they be put into law. These ideas are destructive. How can we prevent that from happening? And our best example is actually our President Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was important for a number of reasons. He thought deeply, often, wherever he was, and in his own mind. He was a keeper of the American values of the American founding. These were very important ideas to him. And you know, they are to me too, and I believe they are to you. Because that right to life that we talk about, that's an assertion of the American founding, that the duty of government is to protect lives. We have to go to our roots. Most importantly, like the founders, Lincoln loved nature. And he talked about the laws of nature and of nature's God, and why we have to assert what is true and revealed facts. So we'll spend a little time right now talking about Lincoln's way of presenting the truth, why it's so very important. Here's one reason. Lincoln was able to present moral truth without being morally condescending. Now, when we talk about the battle we're in right now, about abortion rights, about euthanasia, about the ideology of progressivism, one of the things that happens is they like to bring up your morality, and they like to dismiss your morality, but at the same time, they're asserting their own morality, and often in a very condescending way. It doesn't help if you turn around and do it back. You don't want to be condescending. You don't want to say, well, my religion teaches this, therefore you must obey my religion. That's actually what they're doing. Again, Hegel was a religion, and even Peter Singer spells it out. They're presenting a new faith, a new world order from their religious perspective. We don't want to do that. We're talking about morally absurd ideas are presented as truth that must be put into law. Killing babies after they're born. And there's many, many other progressive ideas that need to be put into place according to this philosophy of progressivism. We spoke about Hegel, Peter Singer, and many, many other people. Some of them hold government positions right now who want to progress to some other new morality, and they're going to force the government to be involved in that process. How do you fight that? Well, we're going to turn to our old friend, the great American president, Abraham Lincoln, who was confronted with the battle of ideas. The great thing about President Lincoln is not only was he a clear thinker, but President Lincoln made it a commitment in his heart to understand the values and stand for the values that were the basis of America's founding. So it's important for you to recognize that. He gives some answers. First, let me give you some background on the significance of Abraham Lincoln. I'm going to read from a biographer of Lincoln's. This is from William Lee Miller. Abraham Lincoln is the greatest of all interpreters of America's moral meaning. Lincoln was a particularly worthy interpreter of America's meaning, in the first place, because he stated it with a rare eloquence. Secondly, he was the primary voice giving the American idea received from the founders its necessary reinterpretation and fresh critical application, because he dramatized the centrality of equality as part of the nation's essence. And in doing these things, he was able, in an unusual degree, to avoid the bane, scourge, curse, and disease that threaten all human statements of moral claims and national ideals. That is to say, self-righteousness, invidiousness, moral pride, and condescension. I think that's an excellent point, because Lincoln was able to stand for truth without being morally condescending. It's extraordinary. I have to remind you about Hegel and Peter Singer and Progressivism. It is a religion, and they, in fact, cannot escape when they say there needs to be a new morality. They, in their very essence, are condemning all other moral values. That means yours, if you think human babies should be protected. And in that religious approach, they actually undercut themselves. I think we need to learn from Lincoln, and we need to understand that ours, in fact, is not a self-righteous or even a religious approach. We are taking this the way Lincoln is. We need to approach things the way Abraham Lincoln did as we approach this great injustice of the killing of unborn children.
You're listening to Life Matters.
Life Film Fest is the creative outreach in Hollywood that's changing Hollywood and the culture. There's many films you've already seen that actually had their start at Life Fest in Hollywood, their premiere. But more than that, we work with people throughout the industry who want to creatively bring the message of life. Not just hit you over the head with it or preach to you about it, but creatively impact the culture so that hearts and minds of our fellow citizens understand the depth and the breadth and the warp and the woof of what the right to life really is. Be part of Life Fest Film Festival and make a difference.
Every life does matter. Every life is significant. Find out about the exciting cultural change impacting Hollywood. Go to lifefilmfest.com. And now back to more Life Matters with Brian Johnston.
So let me remind you, what Lincoln did was not say, I'm a Christian. By the way, Lincoln was a Christian, but we really aren't sure the exact denomination of his background. We don't know a lot about his higher theology, but we do know a whole lot about his understanding of both the law and of scriptures. This is very important because he did not tell people to adopt his morality because his theology was correct. Instead, he pointed only to self-evident facts, to objective truths. That's quite the opposite of what a lot of people do, and you know that. It's the opposite of what progressives are doing. They're proclaiming a new morality based on new assertions. What Lincoln did is he asserted demonstrable facts. How did he do that? Let's talk about it. Lincoln was asked by a pastor of Bridgeport, Connecticut, how he came to be able to so clearly explain essential moral principles of the law. And Lincoln said, to be honest, he never had more than 6 months of formal education. But as you know, he studied the law on his own. And everywhere he came across the law, he said this, in the course of my law reading, I constantly came across the word demonstrate. Lincoln said, I thought at first that I understood its meaning, but soon I became satisfied that I did not. He resolved to understand it better, and he went to his own father's house, and there he stayed until he could give any proposition in the works of Euclid at sight. That is to say, he memorized the mathematics of Euclid. And there's a very famous principle. The Latin term is quod erat demonstrandum. That's QED. And in mathematics, you cannot move forward. You cannot write out a proposition of mathematical truth unless you're able to demonstrate it as a principle, that it's true. From any perspective, it is true. And that's what Lincoln said, that it must be demonstrably true. We know this in the law, there's a lot of assertions. We know that a lot of people will tell you to do something or that something is right or wrong, and they'll make an assertion as to why. But is it tested? Is it demonstrated? Is it actually true? What Lincoln said is that we must be able to demonstrate that which is true. That's what the founders had also said. In fact, not only did the founders, but the British philosopher John Locke, who influenced the founders, he himself insisted that self-evident truth, demonstrable truth, propositions that were obvious and could be demonstrated to anyone mathematically, that these evidences in nature were the basis upon which all just law was to be founded. And so what we have here is an appeal to natural law revealed in nature. Now, I want to mention this for my Christian friends. It's very important that you understand that what Lincoln was saying, what the American founders said in our documents, both the Declaration as well as the Constitution, what John Locke was saying was this: I'm not going to lecture to you about my personal beliefs. I'm going to point out in what God has made. And in fact, they're talking about what it says in the book of Romans. And in fact, it says it so many places. But in the book of Romans 1:20, it says that God has revealed his invisible nature through his visible creation so that they are without excuse. Without excuse of what? They know there's a God. Again, the scriptures, my friend, are replete with this. So it's very important that you recognize that it is the scriptures that tell you to look at nature. Look at the heavens, the moon and stars which you've made. What's man that you're mindful of him? And yet you visit him and you make him a little lower than the angels. So by looking at the stars, by considering these works of nature, it reminds us it's inescapable. There is a God. Again, it says that the language of the heavens speak. The stars themselves speak. There is no land in which that language is not heard. These are the self-evident truths that Lincoln spoke of, that the Declaration speaks of, that moral philosophers speak of, that there are certain facts that are inescapable. What Lincoln said is we must demonstrate these facts before we come to conclusions. And that's really our goal in the pro-life movement, is we want to stand on facts, demonstrable facts, not on our personal assertions or our feelings. When we do that, we're on very, very fragile ground because feelings can come and go. Assertions of our own theology, of our own making, of our personal church, are those appropriate to put into law for someone else? No. We need to establish laws on self-evident truths, on objective facts, and that's what we're called to do in the pro-life movement. So the call that Lincoln put out is that you must be able to demonstrate what the facts are. QED, mathematics, demands it. And so is the case with just law. You have to predicate the laws you want to put into place on objective facts, not on mere assertions. And that's what we see in progressivism. Progressivism makes an assertion, usually it's an emotional assertion about an immoral situation. Often it carries slanderous implications. Rich people are selfish. We have to change that. They should not be as rich. Of course, that's the conclusion of a Marxist Hegelian. Or a National Socialist who wants to throw in race or even gently suggest race. You know, the bankers are controlling all of society, said the National Socialists. And we know what race they are. We must take that race, and it's influenced our culture too much. So there's slanderous implications often in the moral assertions that are presented as the basis for new laws. That's what progressivism does. That's what actually Hegel does. Now, I want to remind you, the reason Hegel is dangerous is not merely because people have weird ideas. People have had weird ideas for a long time. And there's all sorts of people that have weird and strange and inappropriate ideas. The danger in Hegel is this, is it's a moral philosophy that has infected our culture. It's taught in the schools, as both Peter Singer and I have reminded you. It's taught to our culture, but it says more than that these ideas must be in the future. It says that the government must be used to change the future, to bring about this change. It's an invocation of massive government power in order to benefit mankind and to superimpose laws. What Lincoln did, what America's founders did, was exactly the opposite. First, they did not call for a massive government control. In fact, they called for limitation on government because of the danger of massive government. Those are principles revealed in nature and by nature's law. In fact, it's the principle by which the previous idea of the divine right of kings was seen to be an error. Because even though the divine right of kings supposedly called upon divine authority, as you know, many times those in authority have abused that position. And so natural law says, wait a second, there is a law that's greater than the king. That's revealed in nature. Before that king was ever born, there is a law that exists. And that moral law can be recognized. You can look, and if you consider the work of nature, it's not just glancing at the stars. Everybody knows there's stars. But only those who consider the significance of creation can recognize somebody made this. And that, therefore, is the starting point. And it's the starting point of our nation, that God made us. The government didn't make us. And so we don't go beyond that. I don't tell you the particulars of theology, but if you and I agree that there is a God, and if you're an American, it's on every one of your coins. If you're an American, it's in your founding documents. I think it's one of the purposes that the Pledge of Allegiance and other commitments we make as Americans contain this reference to God being greater than our nation. So it's not merely a nationalist assertion. It's an assertion that our nation wants to follow the principles of reality that God has made, self-evident truths. And so if you're a Christian, I want to urge you, look at that. Look at what is really called for as you get involved in public policy. Don't do what the Taliban does. They want to struggle to put in their theology. Don't do what the progressives do, what the Nazis did, what the communists do. They assert there's a new morality, and they want to simply put their personal morality into the law and make everybody follow that. That's not what we do as Americans. We do what's exactly the opposite. We want to discern what is truly right and just, what is demonstrably a principle of justice. And Lincoln did that eloquently. And Lincoln did it without condemning other people's theology. He simply insisted on the self-evident facts, the inescapable truths. And that's what we do in the Right to Life movement. We want to point out about the life of that child, that every child is unique. And we want the law to, again, protect that child. We want it not because we're denying women anything. In fact, more than half of those kids, they are females. We actually want to protect all human lives, just as Lincoln did. And Lincoln had to fight a culture that had been confused and had culturally accepted the wrong ideas. As we join this fight now, as we assert self-evident truths, make sure that you use facts. The fact that that child now killed in a late-term abortion, even their assertions, but maybe the mother's life or health is in danger. Even when her life is in danger, by the way. They use the word health and life very deceitfully, because we know in Roe and in Doe v. Bolton, they went on to define it to be emotional feelings, that was somehow her health was in danger. So they use that deceitfully, but you should know this, that if a mother's life is in danger, particularly late term, the safest possible thing at that moment is a C-section to make sure that both the child and the baby, that we end the pregnancy, terminate the pregnancy, if you will, and save the child's life and save that mother's life. C-sections are the quickest. They've actually been around for a long time. They're named after Caesar. So a C-section is the best thing. You don't have to kill the baby, and especially once the baby's born. If the baby is born, even if they have some kind of impediment, and again, the law in New York and the law proposed in Virginia didn't require that kid to have anything wrong with them in order for the abortionist to kill them. The fact is, every child is a wanted child. To pick up Planned Parenthood's chant, every child a wanted child. That's right, they are. And they actually work to oppose adoption. And yet there's thousands of families that will adopt that very child. Every child is valuable, and every human being has significance in the United States of America. That's the premise of our existence as a nation. So go out, fight for the right to life, fight in the battle of ideas, and make sure that you use the facts, because the facts are on our side. You know, folks have asked if there's different ways they can help us, and one very easy way might be in your driveway right now. The California Pro-Life Council participates in one of the best car donation programs in the nation, Car Easy. So if you have a car or a truck that just can't sell, or maybe you can't fix it, or maybe you're not getting the right trade-in value, you can donate your used car or truck, your boat or RV, and it can be used to make a real difference for the cause of life. At California Pro-Life, our car donation program is one of the best in the nation, because what we do is our volunteers will look your car over, and if there's something basic they can do to make the resale value better, they do that. They'll put in that extra work and then sell the car at auction. The California Pro-Life Council does much better through that process, and so do you, because we give you a tax-deductible receipt for what we receive. I think you're going to enjoy that. This actually happened to me. I couldn't get the trade-in value. I was dismissed by the automobile dealership, and I got so much more by just donating to California Pro-Life's donation program. So to find out more, go to californiaprolife.org, click on the car donation program at the bottom of the page. It says car donation, or call our 800 number, 800-924-2490. Leave the message that you would like to donate a car or a boat or an RV, even a snowmobile. There's so much that you can do with the resources you have, and maybe they're a burden to you right now. You can use them for the cause of life. So that's California Pro-Life car donations. Call 800-924-2490. That's 800-924-2490. And here's an update. We'll also take donations of land and property. Now, sometimes you may be stuck with a piece of land or a house or home through any number of situations, or even you may have securities that you would like to donate. Our attorneys will walk through that, and you can donate your property to the California Pro-Life Council so that that can be used for the cause of life here in California. So go to californiaprolife.org or call our 800 number, 800-924-2490. That's 800-924-2490.
Life Matters is a production of the California Pro-Life Council, the state affiliate of National Right to Life.